So with that, Chris Gobbler.
All right.
We're ready.
We're ready for you now, Chris.
Okay, great.
Morning.
I'd like to introduce you to Frank Russo. He's the Associate Director for the Center for Clean Water Technology. Frank came on with us in 2018. He had a 40-year career with H2M.
I ask if he was still there.
He's now with us, actually, as Associate Director for Wastewater Initiatives. If you didn't know, he designed the tertiary treatment plants that are in Port Jefferson and in Patchogue. He also designed the New York State's first ever fertigation sewage treatment plant in Riverhead, and carried that through from being to being a tertiary plant and then eventually being used for fertigation. So we're very blessed to have Frank on our team. He's bringing great innovation to what we're doing and is a full-on partner. I'm giving this presentation, but I'm sure I'll get to the point where I'll be stumped and he'll have the right answers.
Offense, Chris, but
Yeah.
Christine Fenton, our town engineer, visited your center after Frank been there for a little while, so we saw a high level of practicality being instituted there, so I appreciate it and what you're doing. I'm glad you're there, Frank. I've asked Christine Fenton to be
great.
come here because I think we're going to be talking about PRBs.
A little bit about NRBs, yeah, and wood chips,
Oh,
I was going
sure.
to ask
Yeah,
you, what's the
wood
difference
chips, so-
between the PRB and an
Well,
NRB?
Well, we're involved in giving some wood chips to another system, so I just wanted you to have, thank you, Christine, for coming upstairs. I just wanted you to be available.
Direction.
Yeah, maybe I'll go through and then I'll get to NRBs,
Okay.
and then if you remember, you can ask me about PRBs.
I won't forget.
Okay, so I just wanted to give a background for this project, and I have some slides, obviously. I introduced myself and Frank. I'm the director of the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology, founded at the behest of the governor in 2015 at Stony Brook University. So this project is in West Hampton Beach High Schools, and so I'm going to focus first. This is CPF, and it's about water quality. So I just want to give some context here. These are groundwater nitrogen concentrations around West Hampton Beach Village and West Hampton in general, and you can see there are definitely hot spots in that region, in some cases over 20 milligrams per liter, which we know the EPA drinking water standard is 10. So, and that's just, that you can see anywhere that's in yellow or orange, that's all in the 10 range, and that's the danger zone really for groundwater.
So these are all contributory to the money bog?
Correct, exactly. That's exactly right. And so for the past 8 years, with support from or collaborating with News 12, we've been doing these water quality surveys of all of Long Island, Nassau, and Suffolk County. Actually, last night sent Bill Corbell the first one of 2019. It may look silly with the traffic signs, but what it essentially is doing is using state and federal standards for water quality on different parameters, fecal coliform, water clarity, oxygen, and then giving a quantitative metric for all of those relative to state and federal standards, and then making it simple for public digest in order to just see whether good, fair, or poor relative to those things. Anyway, with a lot of data, we can focus on Moneybog Bay, for example, and this is, as I said, 5 years worth of data. Of all of the stations we look at, 30, Moneybog Bay comes up second worst when it comes to water clarity. And obviously, of the many sites we have in the town of Southampton, it is the worst. The worst one is the Forge River. So obviously water quality, these are algae levels, the total levels of chlorophyll, water clarity, and actually of the 24 sites where we could get a bottom reading, came up as the worst water clarity. There are brown tides in this region all the time. I'm sure that brown tides have contributed to the loss of shellfish and to eelgrass. And the brown tides are actually, this is like the epicenter for brown tide blooms. And this is no surprise, just as background context. Why is this? Well, intense nitrogen loading, and you couldn't be further from the two ocean inlets, right? Dead in the middle between Shinnecock Inlet and Moriches Inlet. And so that's the real danger zone. When you have poor flushing and high nitrogen loads, this is not a surprise. We know these sorts of things are going to happen. Also very low levels of oxygen. The DEC never wants to see below 3 milligrams per liter. We're seeing every summer levels well below that in this region. Just very briefly with regards to protection of marine habitats and salt marshes, of course they're very interesting marine ecosystems, but they're also very important for protecting communities. And so the Moneybog salt marsh is what's being pointed to right there, and you can see that's very large and there's a lot of homes behind that. What I'll point out also is the anticipated sea level rise just by the middle of this century. And essentially what you're seeing is if you look on the western bank of Moneybog Bay, you see homes that will be inundated due to flooding. And on the eastern bank, what you see is that this salt marsh is actually protecting the homes behind it against flooding. I could show you the 2100 map. It's even worse, of course. But Hurricane Sandy, a similar situation. The entire western bank was flooded during Hurricane Sandy, but on the eastern bank, many of those homes and roads were protected because that salt marsh was in place. About the same time Hurricane Sandy hit, a very important paper came out really solidifying the relationship between high levels of nitrogen load and the loss of salt marshes. In this slide, what you see on the top are obviously just photographs of a healthy marsh, one heavily loaded with nitrogen. But on the bottom, from that paper that I'm citing right there, is a CAT scan of the roots of the salt marsh. And so what you see on the right is what happens when a salt marsh is overloaded with nitrogen. Essentially, the roots get weaker. They don't need to work as hard to get that nitrogen out because there's so much nitrogen being provided to them. And therefore, the energy goes into making what's known as above ground biomass. Weaker below ground biomass leads to the collapse of the salt marsh. And so, while that was the flooding that was protection in the eastern bank during Hurricane Sandy in 2012, if we don't mitigate nitrogen load and we continue to lose that salt marsh that's left there, that creates a flooding hazard for this community as well. So before Frank joined us and when he was still with H2M, we worked together on a wastewater study for the village of West Hampton, where we looked at lots of different things. We delineated the entire watershed of West Hampton Beach Village. You can see that the entire, in the red is the full watershed of the village. The only water body that's fully in that watershed is Moneybog Bay. And so when we looked at the sources of nitrogen to that system, you can see that it's 72% wastewater. As you can see, a fraction is from Main Street. That's being taken care of by the sewage treatment plant, but the very large majority still is from on-site systems, including the two schools being the largest source in this watershed. So again, this is what this drafts basically is what the plan that came out for this, and again had multiple phases. Phase 1 was connecting the downtown region to the airport. You're well aware of that. You're supporting that effort. Phases 2 and 3 are expanding the sewer district slightly to a place that makes sense and is feasible and cost effective. But Phase 4 came together when I was working with Mayor Moore, and I said, you know, there are always in these cases of wanting to put in sewer districts the idea that, oh, you just want to promote growth. And so I said, you know, and I know, in speaking with Mayor Moore, that she really wanted to address a very serious situation. If you've been to downtown West Hampton Beach and you go behind that Main Street, I mean, you know, the whole place is already underwater, and you know that the septic tanks are just sitting there. So, you know, she knew that, and that's a real issue. But what I suggested to her is to have an additional phase, because it became very clear with regards to the sewage district that you wouldn't be able to sewer the entire village, which would be cost prohibitive. But why not have the initiative to put everything else on innovative and alternative systems to reduce that total nitrogen load because of the sensitivity of the receiving water body, Moneybog Bay. And so what this shows is how the different phases address the total nitrogen load from the village to Moneybog Bay. And you can see each step is a significant knockdown of the total amount of nitrogen loading, but that the IA systems is really what's going to have the biggest impact. So now turning to what we're doing in the Center for Clean Water Technology, we have our goal, we say 10-10-30. That goal is to design systems that reduce nitrogen below 10 milligrams per liter. We'd like them individually to cost less than $10,000 per home, and we want them to last at least 30 years. I can tell you that we've already achieved 2 of our 3 goals. We have systems that continually deliver less than 10 milligrams per liter, and they're based on technologies that will last more than 30 years. We think 50 years or beyond that. The cost so far has been our biggest challenge, but we're working on that. So I'm just going to very briefly talk about our technologies and get right to the West Hampton Beach School situation. So we're all aware of how systems work now. They're designed specifically to hold on to the solids and release the liquid waste into groundwater. And as we now know, that liquid waste is where almost all the nitrogen is. And so these systems do remove very, very little nitrogen. It says 40 milligrams per liter, but that's way off, particularly for a school where there is no laundry being done, no shower, not as many showers being taken, so that wastewater is not being diluted. And I'll just be blunt here. The biggest source of nitrogen is actually urine, and so that's why wastewater nitrogen in schools is very, very concentrated. We have developed these NRBs, nitrogen-reducing biofilters. I just want to introduce those here. They're meant to be add-ons to any existing system, either residential or larger than that, like a school. How they operate, essentially, is using a technology that is common when there's not a sewage treatment hookup, and that is something known as a drain field. So the wastewater gets distributed through a drain field, and underneath that is very simply two different layers. A layer of sand, for homes at least, it's 18 inches, and the layer of sand mixed with wood chips. And so with that, just looking at how that looks, that sand layer performs something known as nitrification. It takes the ammonium that's in wastewater, converts it to nitrate, and then that lower layer performs denitrification, removes the nitrogen because it converts that nitrate into nitrogen gas. And you need both of these steps in order to get that nitrogen removal.
Those are both aerobic?
So the nitrification layer is aerobic. So if you look at the bar on the right, we have to have nitrification, you need the oxygen. But to get denitrification, you actually need no oxygen whatsoever. And as you can see, we actually, to facilitate that in some systems, we actually have a liner along the bottom. And so that creates this anoxic zone, and that's what allows for denitrification.
This is attached to an existing system. It's like another step in the process.
Exactly.
And how does the gas escape?
It just percolates up and through. And in fact, in some cases, we in experiments, when we do this experimentally in the lab, if you seal the chamber, you can see the bubbles and the gas build up in there.
It's a very, very good visual. to
Yeah.
show that.
Yeah.
The oxygen
We're breathing
doesn't go
80%
down
nitrogen
to
right
keep it-
now, so.
Say that once
And the
more.
oxygen doesn't go down to keep it anaerobic?
Well, the oxygen does go down. So in that lower layer, it stays down and stays anaerobic. So now, as I know you're aware, Article 19 passed in 2016, allowing the ability of Suffolk County to legally install these innovative alternative systems. There are multiple systems out there, at least 6 that have been approved by the county, provisionally approved to be installed. I just put forth this figure here to show all of the systems that they're testing, including the provisionally installed ones. The text might be too small, but what it's showing is that the systems we've put in the ground in Suffolk County are outperforming all the other ones that are currently in the ground. There are some that are doing quite well, for example, the Fuji Clean system, but the data provided by Suffolk County shows that ours are actually doing better than those.
In terms of nitrogen reduction.
In terms of nitrogen reduction. But I'll also point out, you've queued up my next slide.
Can you go back one second?
Yeah,
We're
sure.
trying to read it. So yours is the first and the second one, yeah.
Exactly. So those are our lined and unlined systems that we've installed. And so all the other ones are just different companies that
The
have...
line that's doing the best.
Correct. And the liner gives the assurance that the system will stay with low oxygen, but it costs a little bit more. So the unlined system is simpler to install and also performs pretty well. And so you can see there's several companies that have tried and are just not going to make it clearly in Suffolk County, and some were very surprised in Suffolk County, but there's others that are doing quite well and have already been approved. And some companies have done poorly and have come in and tried to address their systems, and other companies have sort of folded up their tents and gone home, so to speak. But beyond nitrogen, I just also want to emphasize that these systems are doing an amazing job of removing drugs and pharmaceuticals from wastewater as well. And so what this shows is a list of, I think, about a dozen compounds that include antibiotics, drugs, different pharmaceuticals. There's also, I think, caffeine, DEET, and things like that. And then on the right, you see the percent of the influent that gets removed. And in many cases, it's 99%, or it's obviously almost all 90% and above. And this is significantly better than sewage treatment plants do. In fact, we just had a meeting about this on Monday as a center and trying to get a handle on exactly the mechanism, and it looks like the nitrifying bacteria, the ones in that top layer, seem to what is known as co-metabolize and break down these compounds. So beyond just nitrogen, these are doing a good job of cleaning up our groundwater. And of course, we all know, whatever doesn't discharge into surface waters, which I emphasize, we use to drink. And obviously, there's compounds we don't want in our drinking water.
How about phosphorus?
So phosphorus is, again, more than 90% removed by these systems, but actually by any system, because the phosphorus is, once the groundwater becomes oxygenated, binds with iron within the aquifer. So as long as there's oxygen present, you get really good removal of phosphorus.
Chris,
Yeah.
trying to understand how the processes would possibly remove, these chemical constituents. Are they just getting bound up, or are they getting broken down?
No, it looks like, firstly, I'll be perfectly honest, we don't know right now, but we have experiments. Frank has established at the university the first ever we call it our wastewater research and innovation facility. It's literally a trailer that's now plumbed with wastewater from a pumping station, where we can now pump in real wastewater and perform experiments to answer that exact kind of question. As you can imagine, wastewater, municipal wastewater, is a interesting cocktail that's very hard to replicate in a laboratory. But the research that's available to date demonstrates that there's this process, again, it's called co-metabolism, and the bacteria in that upper layer, that sand layer, the nitrifying bacteria, seem to co-metabolize and microbially break down these compounds.
That's amazing.
And I will also say that because we have an 18-inch layer in the way we design them, the water takes almost a day to pass through that layer, so it gives it an enhanced time. So there's a lot of bacterial activity going on in there anyway, and so they've got time to react and act
The
upon these
bacteria is
compounds.
taking in the caffeine and the Tylenol.
And they're not taking it in, they're just breaking it
I was
down.
going to say, they're pretty happy at that point. Energetic,
Pain-free and lots of energy.
no headaches.
Yeah. It's all extracellular bacteria. Yeah.
And I believe that those wood chips came from one of our facilities.
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
Is that what you were
And
gonna say?
We're very grateful for that. That's been a great partnership, and John, you did come visit us and help facilitate it as well, so I think.
We
we'll-
provided the wood chips from,
Yep.
Yes,
And we're providing wood chips to,
Well, that's going to be on for discussion for the Springs school system.
Yep.
The H2M is working.
which I'm going to talk about.
yeah. So that's why, I didn't mean to bring you from your work, but I just wanted to be sure that we were in that loop, and if we can help provide for these projects, should the board decide to go forward with it. I don't know what the total amount is.
And this is a wonderful opportunity for the town as well to utilize some of
You
our.
got to come up, Christina, I'm sorry. No one can hear you.
Okay.
She's like.
Dr. Gobbler?
Yes.
Before you go on, this system works off of a standard septic tank, right?
Exactly. It has,
Septic tanks
our
are
NRBs
solid.
have one, they hook up to existing systems, and they have one dosing pump. So the only moving part is a single dosing pump that takes the wastewater from the tank to the system on a regular basis, which prevents the system from being at the volumetric whim of the home or facility. That is, if you had a lot of showers or laundry being done, the system's not flooded, but rather it gets a steady dose, which research has shown allows the bacteria to do their thing and essentially perform better than if they're just flooded all at once and then go dry and then flooded again, so to speak. So getting on to the system we're looking at, so we're looking at here, West Hampton Beach Middle School and High School. This is the best rendering we have of their wastewater systems right now. A series of pools and rings that were installed. I believe one system was installed recently. There was the gentleman who was on the CPF who helped us decode it all the last time. He's not here. But one set was built, I think, in the 90s, and another set well before that. So the idea would be to reroute the wastewater from these to an IA system, and then probably back into these. But just highlighting some of the points, Janice mentioned that we're looking at two-stage approach to doing this. So I just want to introduce what we're thinking about for this and how it breaks down in those two phases. So the first phase would be CCWT partnering with the town. We would be supporting it in part, and obviously with the school district, and then bringing on an engineering firm to work with them to come up with design. So firstly, we need to characterize the wastewater that's there. We need to know exactly what's in the wastewater, what the exact flows are, because you can't, to properly design the system, you have to know that. So we're proposing a 5-day intensive study during the school year to know the exact characterization of what's in the wastewater, but also the exact flows, because right now it's estimated on the number of people there. We then would have, again, partnering with the engineering firm, have a design report, as well as the preparation of construction plans and specifications. So for this first phase, we're requesting $195,000 of CPF funds. We're donating $48,000 worth of our time and services. Our laboratories are what is known as ELAB Certified Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program, run by the New York State Department of Health. So that is our analyses are certifiable at the state and county level for nitrogen, for pathogens, from other compounds as well. And so I'll just emphasize this whole thing. We will, for this whole project, the center is not getting any money. We're giving money because we think this is a really good project. And so we're donating our time. Frank will be involved. I'll be involved. Our laboratories will be involved. And it's through this phase, I just want to say also, so I've emphasized the NRB, but following our first meeting, and I'm going to emphasize further here, I'm not committing to installing an NRB at this location. What I'm committing to is installing an IA low nitrogen system that is going to be the most cost effective for town dollars and do the best job of removing nitrogen. That may end up being that we simply install our NRB. It may be instead that we end up installing what we're doing similar to the spring school, which we weren't involved in the design part. But in the spring school, they put in a commercial IA system, and they're using our technology as what's known as a polishing step. So we've designed an additional type of NRB we have, takes those wood chips and actually puts them in a box, and actually is even more effective than that line system. And that's what we're doing at the spring school. So I'm like 2 slides ahead because I was going to talk about this.
But how does that work? Like, for people that don't, like as a layperson, you're saying putting it in a box, a different line system. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the NRB, you saw what the NRB looked like before with the 2 different layers. So I guess I'll just go back to show.
Which was fed by the original system.
Yep, sorry about this, but it's yeah. So the box system works just like this system, except that lower layer is not there. And the sand layer feeds into a box that's filled with wood chips. And the nitrified wastewater flows through there, and it actually works even better with regards to reducing nitrogen.
Why?
Was that why you said?
Yeah.
We think it's because it's all wood chips. And so the sand's not in there, and the residence time's a little bit longer. And so, I mean, it's not, I will just say, it's marginally better. So it's like 4 milligrams per liter versus like 6. And the other benefit of having it in a box that's separate is that if you ever wanted to replace the wood chips, you could just open the container and swap them out.
That's sort of how the nitric system works?
It's similar, very similar. Yep.
Is there a leaching field off of the box with the wood chips?
So after the box, it has to go to some final deposition. And so I think I have I'm getting way out of order at my slides, but I think I have it somewhere in there. Maybe I'll just continue to go through this and then, so phase 2 would actually be the construction costs of the construction of the system and then the evaluation of the system. So the construction would be done obviously by a construction firm. The evaluation would be done by the center. And we'd be evaluating its performance. And again,
ELAP is?
That's again the ELAB certification, Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program that the state runs.
Okay.
And so for this whole project then, we'll be contributing and donating tens of thousands of state dollars that the state, we get in support from the state. And Suffolk County, for what it's worth, has pledged also for this project to put forth $10,000. They're very excited. We work very closely, of course, with the Department of Health. All of our systems are being tested through Department of Health Services. And so they believe that this is a great thing. They're aware of the spring school, and this would be the first, obviously, type of, first installing a low nitrogen system in the town of Southampton.
How long has the system been in the spring school?
It isn't even in yet,
No,
actually.
it's
So in fact,
And-
yeah.
Will they be, are the spring school and this one considered pilot programs or actual installations that
So
they
it-
have, the county has said they're okay and that's what?
Well, the county knows about this, and
Right.
they are fully in favor of us doing this. Currently, our NRB systems are in the experimental phase within the county, but our data shows that our systems could probably collapse now, and we'd still make it to what's known as the next phase, the piloting phase. And then a year of data brings that to the provisional phase. But within this, we're allowed to put in 10 systems of each of the different types, and we've only have a handful of each, so.
Yes, Chris?
Yeah.
In an application like this with a school, if you're going to go the NRB, if I'm saying that right, can kids play, like, can there be a lawn on top of it that's
Correct.
actually usable?
Yep.
And that's okay for kids to play on top of it? Yeah.
Yes, because remember, the wastewater is being distributed several feet down, so.
And I think this is one of the reasons why schools and facilities make sense for your technology, because you need the broader
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Some of the issues, obviously, that we've had is trying to shoehorn some of this into these are a little tighter spaces. So the box idea is kind of interesting in that respect, too. So, it makes perfect sense what you're
So
suggesting to me.
it potentially could cut down on fertilization, cut down on irrigation?
But it depends on the final deposition. What we think is going to be the most cost-effective is actually to run the wastewater back to the existing leaching pools, in which case there wouldn't be any irrigation benefit per se. We are working with the county, however, on some technologies that would involve some irrigation or fertigation sort of,
You get, maybe you don't have enough data or time in the field with these systems, but, our experience with the PRBs, maybe, are we seeing, do they settle, the wood chips, as they, biodegrade? Do you see the earth starting to drop down?
we compact them as they're installed, so there shouldn't be a lot of compaction because of that. And also, when we do that as a singular layer, we are mixing it with sand also. So they're being mixed, and so it's not all wood chips, that layer, it's sand. It's usually a 50-50 mix, and there's compaction as it goes along. Yeah.
Okay. But you can watch that, if you start to see the ground sinking a little bit, you can add more topsoil, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. We haven't seen that thus far. So, a lot of words here, hope I can even read through them all. But, so, I'm saying that we're not going to choose the exact system because I think we'd love to see our NRB system go in there, but it may not make sense logistically, cost-wise. We do think, no matter what, that our polishing units are what's going to give the lowest effluent. And so I think we'll be driven by cost and also feasibility and also what gets us the lowest nitrogen. If we did do a lined NRB, Frank has estimated we need about a quarter acre of the field that would be adjacent to the high school, and as you pointed out, John, that is available. But again, we may consider a commercial system, and either way, we want to reuse the existing infrastructure because typically that results in a cost savings. But
Is that polishing unit, is that above ground or is that in ground?
that's in ground, yeah.
In ground?
Yep. And again, we anticipate that we'll get the concentration of nitrogen below 5 milligrams per liter with that polishing unit. So just considering the existing use of school, these are estimates. Obviously, we'll get a finer sense of this once we do our wastewater study. But we estimate there's probably about 1,800 pounds of nitrogen being produced per year from this school. And we think we can be cutting that down by 95%. With the systems, and therefore removing 1,700 pounds of nitrogen per year from this watershed. And as I've emphasized in my introduction, and maybe I didn't say this, but I'll just say this now, I can't think of another location in the town of Southampton that needs nitrogen mitigation more than this location. Again, considering just the surface waters, but also protecting the community and that salt marsh that's there.
Well, the Moneybog is the second most prepared water body we have, correct?
Well,
Or actually, we could say.
second or first.
First.
Yeah, I mean, it would depend how you divide it up and how much ownership you would take of the Peconic River.
Right.
But as far as a full marine water body is fully in town of Southampton waters, yeah, between Moneybog and Quantuck, that's, yeah. I mentioned the spring school already, so we already don't really need this, but again, there's going to be a ribbon cutting for the installation of the system that's going to go on at the end of the month, I believe, and then we're expecting this summer for the install to happen. So it's a great, it's a great project because it's right on. I
So
believe it's right on
for extrapolation on we're looking at 240 1,000 cubic yards, is that correct? Or 240,
That's for the, I think 240 yards for the.
is it 240 yards, right?
The contractor had asked for.
Okay, so is that a comparable number that we would be looking at in West Hampton? Springs is a smaller school, no, so it'd be about double that?
It depends on the alternative.
Yeah.
It depends on which system we go with.
Because I'm trying to link this, Councilwoman Lofstad had a great idea many years ago about, taking our southern pine beetle, pine trees that have been destroyed by the southern pine beetle as a source as well. And we produce a lot of
Yeah.
already, so.
And I'll mention in our research trailer that we're actually doing experiments with oak and that exact pine, just to affirm that they're both performing equally well. We think that they will. Yeah.
Are you concerned at all? Because we've had so many issues with compost facilities and manganese, radionuclides and other things that, that basically using all these, this wood chip material might be introducing toxins, or is it all checked out before it's used?
We've done those experiments, and so what's very clear is, yes, when you create an anoxic environment and you've got organic material that's in sand, you're going to leach out metals. But what's also clear is that 99.99999% of our groundwater is oxygenated. And so we've done the experiments of what happens when that anoxic groundwater becomes reoxygenated. And the bottom line is all the metals that went into solution and are suddenly at high levels precipitate back out. So for example, we've done the experiment where we take the anoxic groundwater that comes out of an NRB and then run it through 18 inches of sand. And it's actually just in the very top layer, everything goes back to normal. And so by the time you only get a few inches down, the groundwater looks like exactly as it did coming in. So these are just what are known as redox reactions, right? So you're creating an anoxic zone. Some metals become more soluble, like manganese, like iron, and then some become less soluble, like copper, for example, and then it goes back. So the only time that I'd be concerned would be if you had that anoxic water that was going towards a well. And that, hopefully would never be the case, because when they design homes, they always make sure that the well is not downstream of the wastewater.
Where is the Suffolk County, the wells for supplying local drinking water? I think they're above that watershed.
Yeah, they're up north of Grebretsky Airport, like right in the Pine Barrens, yeah. So just a couple of things about cost-benefit analysis. We were asked that by the CPF committee, and so this project, Frank has estimated, would be the equivalent of sewering about 60 homes, and the cost would be actually more for the installation compared to what this would be. And then, again, Frank prepared this. He rightly points out we expect this to be done in 2 years, and you're not going to get 60 homes. You're not going to find 60 people and tell them within 2 years, upgrade. So we think this is a good alternative. And again, this will be the first public school in the town of Southampton to get CPF funds to address wastewater, so it could be a good blueprint for future efforts.
You're saying it's basically, the estimate is 25,000, and it would do as much nitrogen removal as 1.5 million, and if those were individual systems for homes.
Correct.
And that is a much better bang for the buck.
Yeah. And then, I spoke with Superintendent Mike Rade of the West Hampton Beach School District, and also as many of the teachers there. And I'm sure we all can estimate this is a great educational opportunity for students. To essentially understand wastewater systems, understand the chemistry. We're going to be doing an analysis of the wastewater. So we already have ties with the school district, but certainly it's a great opportunity for them to learn more, and even maybe be involved in the design of things and talk, show them what the alternatives are and have them consider the optimal design.
It's interesting, when I was a science fair judge at the elementary school in Remsenburg, and a large percentage of those science experiments by the elementary school students were dealing with issues like this.
Yeah.
So that's very promising.
Yeah,
I think it's a
absolutely,
great
absolutely.
Great thing.
This is probably too small to see in text, maybe it's not for you, but this just breaks down the costs of what we're estimating for the whole thing. But the bottom line, again, is that the first half of the request is $195,000 to do the design and construction design and feasibility aspect of it. And then the rest is just an estimate of what it would cost, because we won't know until we know what we're choosing.
Will you provide this PowerPoint to us?
Sure, absolutely. This is just it's
I have a different version.
yeah, slight modification of what I sent the
I'm a little confused, so Chris, the total cost is what,
1.5 million
For both phases, we're not approving.
for both phases.
what was that number you just showed me on the last slide?
1.5 million.
No, but the system would
195.
cost $25,000 to,
Individual systems. But that's, I will also say, though, that's site-specific. So I think you get at $25,000 for an individual system if you have a simple install.
oh, so you were doing,
You're basing that on our...
this was
our
1.5, the
realized
other one was 25,000 for 60 homes, so.
Correct.
So what is that, 25?
Per home.
25,000,
Per
right,
home.
per
An IA
home,
system
times
per home.
60 is how much?
Putting into the rebate system.
Right.
Like if everyone, 60 homes were to do it.
At 25,000, 1.5 million, I did it.
It's 1.5 million, and this is also 1.5 million?
1.5.
Correct.
So
Although
then Howard, then it's not a better bang for the buck, it's about the equivalent bang.
You're
for the
saying
buck.
it was
Well,
very
that-
low that they would even do it.
It's equivalent. So
Equivalent.
60
Ins-
homes is
But you're
Mitigating
it's
more
not
nitrogen.
really equivalent, because you're hopefully reducing a lot more nitrogen than our current systems do.
In a
That's true.
faster way as well.
correct.
Yeah,
And the cost of-
Right,
yeah.
and assuming the school too has a higher nitrogen concentration.
I think we're,
Yeah, it certainly
that's
will.
pretty well, that's been pretty well studied.
Yeah.
My question about that, though, is the effectiveness of the system. You get this big drop-off, obviously, in use in September, at the end of the school year, for those few months, period. How does that affect the system, is, I guess, a question.
That's an excellent question.
Or
You have
sit
to
at the
speak in the
table.
mic.
Yes, so, I mean, with sewage treatment in general, the bugs like to see a constant food supply. So here we're cutting it off, periods in time. So we have to design around that. We do that by putting in equalization tanks that hold it during the period that they're not there. So that increases the overall cost. So, and we do that, well, when I was with H2M, that's what we did. We always put in a big tank, equalization tank, to buffer the flow.
And does it do it automatically, or is it
Yeah,
manual? that
everything
it-
is auto.
And many schools have activities over the summer. They have summer school.
do,
They have
they do.
staff that work. They also have
Right.
camps,
So-
training camps, sports
so
camps.
what we'll
But
do-
would that be enough to keep the system going?
No. So it's based on pounds of loading.
Right.
So what we do is we build it in segments. So we'll have a left half and a right half. Or we might do in quarters. So the system just gets valved off, and we'll continue to recirculate that. The system comes back very quickly. As soon as you start supplying the wastewater, it'll come back very quickly. But that's some of the research that we need to do, and right now, we haven't been able to do it because we don't have a full-scale installation to deal with.
So those equalization tanks, are they barometrically run, or
They're off floats. It's just a function of
of the topography of the...
the volume of the tank.
So you don't have to manually open and close the
No,
valves?
no,
They're all
nothing's
automated.
manual these days.
All right,
Thanks, Frank.
And I think I don't have any more, yeah, so.
All right, any other questions? Christine?
I thank you for asking me to come up because this is a wonderful presentation, and I think it's also a wonderful opportunity for the town to reuse the wood chips that we're making as a recycled product. We've been getting inundated with the material coming into the vegetative waste sites. So if this program it catches on and we can do it at other facilities, it'll be beneficial for us as well. In addition to being such a water quality benefit. So.
Thanks, Christine.
Is there, Christine, I mean, for the chips to be usable, is there a condition they need to be kept in? In other words, if they sit in the compost for too long, are they still usable?
Well, you bring up very, very good points, because generally when our wood comes in, it's mixed loads of different species. It's got tree limbs with leaves on it. They really like the wood chips, and we've been focusing on the pine right now. But as Frank mentioned, they've been working with oak, which is also beneficial because in addition to the pine beetle issue that we've been having, there's oak wilt, which is another devastating disease of trees. But we keep that wood logged until a certain time period before they need it, so that it doesn't get, when you chip woods and you don't mix it, it tends to gain a lot of heat and has the potential to catch fire. So we like to, bank our pine trees in a pile and chip it special for them, and I believe it has to be 2-inch chips, so we have to double grind it, change out the grates in our mow bark. So it's a process.
Yeah, so you really can't use like a composted material. You have to use
I would
fresh
love
wood
it
chips.
if we
that
could
would
do
be good.
that, but
It's a problem.
that would be wonderful.
All right, so it's
That's what you guys
basically,
need to study.
it's basically so fresh.
We actually are doing that experiment.
Great.
At the trailer, so we're
Are
looking
you?
at the third type of wood, so we're looking at oak, pine, and then like the mix of, whatever's available, and see if that does the same job, so.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I have a
We
question
have a lot
about
of
the
compost.
funding
Yes.
and the Center for Clean Water Technology. I know in Sag Harbor, in the village, that the town gave some money to have the village, the waters in the harbor tested, and there was an issue between municipalities getting money over to the Center for Clean Water Technology.
Actually, that was not done by the Center for Clean Water Technology.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
so that was done by my research lab, which is actually a different entity.
different
Yeah.
entity.
Yeah.
Thank you for making
You're
that
welcome.
distinction.
All right, any other questions for Chris? Bays are good,
So far, no brown ties, that's a good sign. Yeah.
Good. That's a good thing. Anywhere or just the Shinnecock Bay?
Anywhere so far. So
Okay, anything else we need to be aware of?
The governor, I'm meeting with the governor in 2 hours. He's coming to plant clams in Belfort Bay.
Are we getting the clams for Shinnecock?
I hope so. I know that the town lawyers are working on it, so
Okay,
I think there's small progress, I think, but
okay.
I'll certainly be asking the DEC about that today.
All right, good luck with that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.